There have been a lot of videos out lately which have tried to tie in various financial and also political events to some sort of numerological system based on ideal sorts of numbers. And in particular, I can cite the work of the dollar vigilante, Jeff Berwick, and also a man called Pulney. Now, each of these have looked at something called the Shemitah cycle, a 7-year cycle, and also something referred to as the Jubilee year, a kind of cancellation of all debts which would have associated upheaval. Now, in looking at their work then, I've seen some of the connections they make, and I just want to show a few clips on the screen here so you can see some of the examples. The first clip that you see here is the website from the Dollar Vigilante, and what he notes here, Jeff Berwick, is that the time interval between the financial crash that occurred on September the 29th, 2008, and the one which occurred the day after the Brexit vote on June the 24th, 2016, has a very interesting time separation interval. You can see here it is 7 years, 7 months, 7 weeks and 7 days. And he also notes that when the Dow Jones itself made its significant crash on the 2008 date, it did so by 777 points. Now, in addition to his work, there's also the work of Pulney, and he looks at this specifically in terms of biblical timing cycles. This is a snapshot from an interview that he gave. You can see again that the number 7 is very, very important here, and he talks about the number 1260 days. This is a reference to a value that is given in Revelation in the Bible, but he also makes reference to it being linked to Daniel's timeline. And you can see in particular a 7-year cycle of 2,520 days here, which is equal to 7 years. Now, these years are not current Earth tropical years, but they are in fact ideal Earth tropical years, which are equal to precisely 360 days. Now, this idea of ideal celestial cycles is one that I am very familiar with, as in my own book, The Lost Age of High Knowledge, I discuss at length all of the cycles of the planets within the solar system and how they appear to have been transformed from an ideal set to their current set. So we have the Earth itself going from 360 days to its current value of just under 365 and a quarter. We've also got a transformation of the moon month from 30 days to just slightly half a day less. There are very precise laws, though, that govern all of this. And I also mention these in my website. If you go to a few of my essays on the Occult Physics website, you can see here some examples. Here you can see my article on ancient Egyptian astronomy, looking at the ideal Earth year of 360 days and the ideal month of 30 days. In my work I show that there are very exacting mathematical laws that simultaneously transform the Earth year and the moon month, and if you back-transform the Earth year to an ideal of 360, you also back-transform the moon month to an ideal of 30 days. This is achieved by special laws of proportion, of the same format as Kepler's law of proportion, from which we derive the general inverse square law. Now, in this current video I wish to perform my own analysis of some of the key events, both political and economic, which have occurred over the past several years or so, and see if there's any truth to this point that they are related by some sort of idealized set of time intervals, okay? Especially related to the Babylonian system based upon 360 days. So I've gone to look at some of these cycles and also see if there's any comparisons to the work of such as Pulney and Jeff Berwick. So the events then that I have chosen are as follows. Black Monday, 1987. This is where the stock market crashed on October the 19th, with the Dow Jones in the United States losing some 508 points. This was a percentage drop of some 22.6%. A lot of money indeed was lost on this day. The second date of interest is September the 11th, 2001. This is when the Twin Towers were struck by planes. Now, this led to quite a loss of life. As far as the financial markets were concerned, they were delayed when the first plane struck, but then suspended entirely when the second plane struck. The next event I wish to talk about is the assassination of Robert Kennedy in 1968. Now he was actually shot on June the 5th of that year, but he died some 26 hours later from his injuries on June the 6th. Now, as everyone knows, I'm sure, Robert Kennedy was the brother of John Kennedy, the president assassinated in 1963. Following this, we then have the assassination attempt against Ronald Reagan on March the 30th, 1981. Now in this case, although Reagan was shot, he was not in fact killed. He managed to get to hospital and did survive. Now, as indeed with the two Kennedy assassinations, it was all hung upon a lone gunman. The next event is the stock market crash of 2008. This was the one mentioned by Jeff Berwick previously. This is where the Dow Jones collapsed 777 points. This occurred on the 29th of September, resulting in a market loss of some $1.2 trillion. It was caused specifically by a vote in the House of Representatives, wherein a bailout plan was rejected. The next event of interest is the so-called 2010 flash crash, which occurred on May the 6th. This resulted in a very sudden drop in the Dow Jones of approximately 1,000 points. Apparently, the official explanation is that it was some sort of algorithmic formulas which kicked in and caused the collapse inadvertently. The next event is the 2015 stock market sell-off. Now this occurred on August the 24th, and again it involved the Dow Jones opening up suddenly with a 1,000 point drop. Over the course of the day, though, it did claw back some of the losses to finish 588 points down. The final date to consider is the date of the stock markets collapsing globally as a result of the Brexit vote. Now the vote itself took place on the 23rd of June, just recently, and it was on the 24th that the markets collapsed. I myself, being British, voted, and I voted to leave with no apologies. Now in particular, with regard to the United States stock market, the Dow Jones itself closed down some 610 points. Now in this analysis, I do believe that there is primacy in the single standard solar day of 24 hours. This is an idealized cycle, even though the planets themselves have been transformed in their total orbital period times. This cycle of a single day has remained the same as an ideal standard. As a result then, this is the unit of measure I want to apply here and see if there are any significant relationships between different events of note based upon whole numbers of days. Now, as this analysis involves looking at the time interval between two different dates expressed in terms of whole numbers of days, the best way to proceed is to make use of the Julian day number system created by astronomers as a means to establish a continuous count of days, with zero date being set at January the 1st, 4713 BC. Now, as this date is very deep into the past, current dates around this present era are all approximately around the 2.45 million range. We may give the example of January the 1st, 2000, which is 2,451,545 days. This is the day number under the Julian system. With respect then to the specific events listed, in this analysis I convert all of the Gregorian dates into their respective Julian day numbers. This will allow for ease of subtraction between values to obtain the absolute interval in terms of solar days. In saying this, I will also point out that anyone can verify what I am about to do, as there are many converters on the internet which allow anyone to input Gregorian calendar dates and convert them to Julian day numbers. With that said, I will proceed with the analysis, looking at the first two dates of interest. The first dates you can see on screen then are for the 24th of August 2015 and the 29th of September 2008. Now the August date was associated with the sudden 1,000 point drop of the Dow Jones. The 29th of September date, though, this is the one that occurred with the 777 point drop. This was at the height of the financial crisis. You can see beside the calendar dates the Julian day numbers. Subtracting one from another, we can see the time interval between both events, 2,520 days, and this indeed is one of the numbers mentioned by Pulney. it is equal to 7 periods of 360 days, the ideal Earth year under the Babylonian system. Now this certainly is a very intriguing result, but there's more. Let's consider the next two dates. We now have the September the 11th 2001 event, where the planes crashed into the Twin Towers. This is set against a more recent event, the fallout from the Brexit vote. It was here that the vote itself to leave the European Union took place on the 23rd. It was the fallout in the financial markets that occurred the day later on the 24th. Now the time separation between these two events in whole numbers is absolutely astounding. Precisely 5400 days, and in this case this is equal to 15 periods of 360 days. We can see then that certain important events seem to harmonize in terms of this 360-day cycle. Now this gets quite sinister when we consider the next association. On screen you can see the first date, the 30th of March 1981. This is the date when the attempted assassination against Ronald Reagan was made. June the 6th, 1968. This is the actual date that Robert Kennedy died. The shooting took place a day earlier, but, as was mentioned previously, he died 26 hours later on June the 6th. Look at the time interval between these two events. Precisely 4,680 days. And once more, this contains a whole number of ideal years. In this case, 13. Moving forwards, we can consider some more subtle variations that link to the ancient Babylonian system. Now here again we have the September the 11th 2001 date. This is set against the May the 6th date, the so-called flash crash event. The time separation between these events is 3,159 days. Now this would appear somewhat unremarkable. However, if we divide it by 13, we get 243 days. Now this numeric sequence is very readily connected to the Babylonian system. We need only divide 243 by 9 and then multiply by 2. We get 54 days. This is of the same sequence as the 5400 days that separated September the 11th from June the 24th, the market crash following the Brexit vote. Also, I would draw your attention to the connection between the September the 11th event and the death of Robert Kennedy, for this also ties into the numeric sequence 243 in a rather basic way. The time separation between events is 12,150 days. If we simply multiply this by 2, we get 24,300 days, the 243 sequence. Now the final connection I wish to present is somewhat subtle. This links the great financial crash of 1987 to the financial crash following the Brexit vote. You can see here I have taken 29 periods of 360 days. This gives me 10,440 days. If this is added to the October date, we get a value that falls just short of the June 24th date. The exact separation, though, would appear to be highly significant. 36 days exactly. In concluding here, I do believe that there really is something to numerology. There is a system that connects up various events. Now what that means in terms of things like free will and determinism, those are very complex subjects for another time. But there do appear to be numerical relations that do tie together special events of great financial and political significance. We've only just scratched the surface here though, so other studies will need to be made here. With that said though, I want to leave it here, and I've got some links in the description box to my websites and also some of the videos by the Dollar Vigilante and Bo Pulney, so you can look more extensively at their work also.